Welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. This is our virtual Meet the Candidate night for our delegates in District 10. This is for the Republican nomination of the Utah House of Representatives District 10 seat. With us tonight, we have our candidates, Travis Campbell and Lorraine Brown. Both candidates have not served previously and are vying for the opportunity to challenge the current Democrat incumbent this November. So thanks again for joining us tonight. We appreciate you taking the time to do your part to vet our candidates and to ask them questions to get to know them as well as we possibly can in these unique circumstances we find ourselves in. With that, I've explained the rules to our candidates tonight. We'll give either or both of them, I should say each of them, 3-minute introductions. With that, we'll have 90 seconds to answer the questions that have been submitted by our delegates, and we'll give them both 3-minute closing statements at the end. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the audience knows I'm using what's called a randomizer app. What that does is just randomly chooses who gets the question when. So sometimes one candidate will start, sometimes another candidate will start, and we'll just alternate back and forth depending on what the magic button says. So that's that. If you recognize there isn't a pattern, there's not. It's completely random. With that, we'll go ahead and start with first introduction statement for Miss Lorraine Brown. Lorraine.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to the delegates tonight. I think most of these delegates have seen me before. I ran in 2018 against Lou Shurtleff, lost by about 500 votes once you subtract the 320 that the writing candidate took. So I feel like I was very close to defeating the Democrat in the last race, and I look forward to this opportunity again. I know Lou Shurtleff well, and I know what her weaknesses and her strengths are, and I think I can do this. But for those of you who don't know me, I am an attorney and small business owner. I own my own practice. I have been practicing law in Weber County for about 20 years. I also have a large family. I'm the mother of 11 children. I'm also a grandmother at this point. And my reason for running is to shift the focus, or at least interject a little bit of maybe a feminine focus in the state legislature. I feel like my interest in family law, my practical experience as a mother, grandmother has given me a unique perspective of what is going on right now for Utah families and how the exponential growth in our state is impacting our families. I'm concerned that there is a strictly business approach to that growth. This also affects our quality of life, affects our families, and not always in a positive way. I'm concerned about that and want to help our young families in their efforts to get a toehold on life in our state and make that a positive experience for them and secure their future. So I have the slogan that I'm running on is protecting our families, securing our future. So when you see me, I want you to think Utah families, keeping our families strong and safe. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll turn to Mr. Travis Campbell.
Hi, I'm glad to have this opportunity too. It's a strange time right now, and not getting the opportunity to really meet with any delegates face to face. I guess this is the next best thing. But the reason I'm running, I'm sure many of you weren't happy with the way that last election turned out, and I don't think we're being well represented here in Weber County by our incumbents. So I think I've got the understanding of the legislative process. I think I have the relationships with folks in our state government, locally, here in the city and the county, as well as a lot of our constituency here, to understand what we need from our state and to understand how we go about making sure we get good policy that benefits Weber County. I've been a lifelong Republican. I've served as a delegate, both county and state, every opportunity I could, and I respect this process. I respect you as delegates to step up and serve in this great process that we have. I'm a big fan of the caucus convention system, so I am relying on you and hoping I can gain your support here. Some of the the other things we need to focus on that I think our current representative is not doing a great job with is preparing for the growth. Like Ms. Brown said, we've got exponential growth here in Utah, especially here in Weber County. So we need to make sure we're planning ahead and we're enacting good policies that prepare us for those growing pains and make sure that we do have a good thriving community for our children and our grandchildren. So I think that's one of the most important things we should be focusing on now. Along with that comes, a focus on education. I was happy to see our legislature increased our education funding. So I think that's definitely got to be a main focus, both K through 12 and higher ed. And with Weber State right here in our district and our tech college, I think there's a lot our state could do to help benefit those institutions, which in turn benefits our community and our workforce. So those are a couple of the reasons why I'm running. But again, I think I've got the understanding, I've got the relationships to go to the legislative session and be effective and do some good for our corner of Weber County. That's why I'm running.
Thank you both. There's a lot of places to start here, and probably the most consistent question that we've received right out of the gate from across the county is the very simple question: what is the proper role of government? And so with that, we'll go ahead and start with Lorraine again. Lorraine, what is the proper role of government?
Well, that is, poli-sci 101. And I think you've got to answer that question by looking at the Constitution itself. The preamble to the Constitution discusses the proper role of government, that it is to provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, to provide the services that the people cannot provide for themselves. That's the proper role of government. There are many things that we can do for ourselves and government should permit us to do for ourselves. But the role of government is to fill those functions that we cannot provide in our own families and communities. So you're looking at public sanitation, you're looking at education, defense, and promoting the general welfare.
Okay, and Travis?
I think the proper role of government is simply to protect our God-given rights, our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think that's got to be the first and foremost on any policy maker's mind is really those protections for their constituency. And obviously the federal government's going to have a different set of responsibilities than state government, and state's going to have a separate set than our county and our cities. But really at each level, the proper role should be to protect our rights and make sure that we have the freedoms that we so much cherish and enjoy here in America. I think it's that simple.
Hey, very good. Thank you. Their next question is a follow-up to that and really relates to the specific role that you're both seeking right now, the state representative. Considering your answer to the proper role of government, what is your role in executing that vision that you both mentioned? It laid out, in our Constitution. What is the role of a state representative? Travis, let's hear from you first this time.
For a state representative, the role is to represent your constituency in this case your House district. I think the state does have a separate set of responsibilities that are very important, and it's our job as if we're lucky enough to be elected as state representatives to know what's important to our district and make sure we represent them well. And really it will be a balancing act to make sure we're acting within the bounds of what our government should be doing, and while at the same time serving our constituency. And I think having a good relationship with the constituents and hearing from them, hearing what's important, hearing what the needs in the community are, and supporting those kind of measures in the state legislature. I think that's what I would hope to see in a state legislator, and what I would expect of myself if I'm lucky enough to be elected.
Okay, very good. Lorraine?
Thank you. In a nutshell, my job would be to articulate the perspective of my constituents, to give this corner of Weber County a voice at the state legislature. I'm concerned that we have not had that voice for the last 2 years. We have a very elderly representative. I won't go into that, but my job is to make sure that the perspectives of my constituents are reflected in what happens at the state legislature. To do that, I've articulated a three-pronged approach. I call it the AAA strategy for success: access, action, and accountability. Representatives are closest to their constituents. They have to have access to me. I have to have access to them and become informed as to what those concerns are, what's important for our constituents. Take action and be accountable for what I do at the state legislature. That's my job.
Good. Thank you. There's you touched on this just a minute ago, Lorraine, on being accessible, and this situation has forced us into a scenario where we're creatively looking for ways to connect with one another that probably should have happened before now, right? Like it's done that. We've seen that across all sorts of industries. I work in the healthcare field, and we are doing all sorts of creative things to try to figure out how to still be effective and take care of this. And this benefit of this is I think we'll probably be better off right after this is over. The question that's come in is, once this is over, how do you envision connecting with your constituents? How do you make sure that you're staying in touch with, the delegates, the people in your district, that you can properly represent them because what's happening? How do you envision connecting with your constituents? We'll go back to Travis for this one first.
Well, I think it's easy nowadays with technology. Technology makes it really easy to connect with people. Emails are great, phone calls are great, and social media is a really easy way to let our constituents know what we're doing. And I think a face-to-face meeting is always better. I think that's when you really get to know somebody and can really connect with them on a personal level. So I think any opportunity to connect face-to-face, whether town halls, meet the candidates are usually a great time to do that, or even during the legislative session. When you're right in the middle of it all, that's a great time to connect with your constituents. But again, with technology nowadays, it's really easy to make sure that your constituents know what your thoughts are, why you're voting the way you're voting, and that can be done through various ways, through social media, through emails, through videos, things like that. So I think it's a great time to be able to connect with constituents, and there should be, there's no excuse not to connect nowadays. I think it's something that we can definitely expect of our representatives.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes, first of all, I think we need to understand that not only is this an effective way, it is a more effective way than traditional routes of methods of communication. Virtual communication is more effective, absolutely. So what I would like to do is have monthly virtual cottage meetings on the issues that I'm dealing with at the state legislature and receive input from the community regarding their concerns on those issues. And then I would also schedule bi-weekly virtual meetings with constituents for them to raise concerns. So reports going both directions, I guess, is what I'm looking for. And I would be using a virtual format similar to what we've got here going on, where you'd have a 10-minute presentation from me or from a speaker speaking about the issue that we're discussing that night, and then open it up for feedback from those who are online. I don't think email is the best way, just because it doesn't require a two-way response, no immediate response with email. I also really like some newsletters that I've seen going out from state legislators. Unfortunately, they've never been coming out in our district, but I have seen this across the state. Very effective means of letting voters know what you are doing and what the issues are currently at the state legislature, so they can weigh in on those things and give you some feedback.
Hey, thank you. Now, there's a number of questions that we haven't talked about. Some that we did talk about in a previous conversation a little bit, that are unique to your role at the state legislature. we've talked about the purpose of government. We've talked about sort of what your vision of that in that role is, but we've had a lot more questions come in about specific issues. So we're going to try to run through these fairly quickly, try to get through as many of them as we can. And away we go. So the first question, we had a number of questions relate to the issue of abortion. So first, should any person in Utah be denied equal protection under the law based solely on whether that person has been born? And we'll start with Lorraine.
Okay, well, you're talking about applying the equal protection child, which is, that's charting new ground. I absolutely agree that that is what we're talking about in terms of whether this unborn child, this fetus, has constitutional rights. That is uncharted ground. I don't think we need to go there to defend the rights of an unborn child, but yeah, that's definitely one argument that might be raised in support of the pro-life movement. I want voters to know I am pro-life. I'm a mother of 11 children. I adore my children and my family, and nothing is more reprehensible to me than the thought of taking a life of an unborn child. I will defend abortion or pro-life, anti-abortion measures in the state, and uphold our right as members of this great state to take a stand and be a model for the rest of the nation. I think the time has come for us to do that, to stand up and raise our voice here.
Okay, and Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I completely pro-life. I'll tell a quick. I mean, I can't say any more than what Lorraine had said. I mean, we need to be supporting any kind of measure that limits or restricts abortion. I believe we should be supportive of. My daughter, when she was still in the womb, we had a doctor during an ultrasound try and convince us we should have an abortion. So there were going to be things wrong with her, and that he was very uncomfortably pushing an abortion on us. And my daughter turned out perfectly happy and healthy and has not got a single thing wrong with her. And I think that's one of the things I've seen personally, that what's wrong with the system we have now, and we do have people pushing abortions for really no reason other than to push abortions. And it's something that really, even though I was very much pro-life before, that really stuck with me and will always stick with me, and made me realize how often that probably happens. And somebody gets bad advice and goes along with an abortion, and it's just the most terrible thing in the world to me. And I would never support anything that would make it easier, and I'd be more than happy to support anything possible to make it more difficult or restrict it.
So I'm laughing a little bit inside. I think I laughed out loud as I asked the question for Lorraine in that context. I did that, and I'm not going to tell you which delegates asked which questions, but I am going to tell you this one. That one came from Senator Lee.
Oh.
So anyway, so now that you understand where it came from, you may understand a little bit more of why it was couched in that framework. So okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. We talked about this a little bit last time in our conversation about how the government tends to pick winners and losers in business. This happens a lot in the recruitment phase of bringing business in to the state. This is something that the legislature deals with on a regular basis. What the question then is, what is your position on government engaging in this practice, and how do you feel like we can ensure an even playing field, especially for our businesses that have been here and that are currently paying the freight, paying taxes? And we'll go ahead and start with Lorraine.
Okay, this is a topic that I'm very concerned about and want to understand a little bit better. But okay, two things. First of all, I'm very opposed to tax incentives for businesses to come to our state, to the Utah state. I feel like we have better things to do with our tax money than to pay people to come here. certainly at our expense. We have better things to do with our money. Second, I'm interested in investigating a way of requiring those who come to our state to bear the weight of the burden of the costs of expansion of our roads, our services to accommodate this growth. Those who come here should be bearing the weight of that, not the rest of us who have been here all our lives and trying to support our families. So I'm interested in kind of trying to shift that burden for the consequences, the cost of that growth to those who come here. They want to come to our great state and exploit our natural resources and take advantage of our services and our wonderful climate and beautiful amenities here. Help pay for it. So
Okay.
that's what I'm investigating.
Thank you. Travis.
When it comes to taxes, I think taxes should be fair and equal across the board. So no, I don't like the idea of one business getting a tax break over another. I think we should let the market decide who's successful and who's not. It's not government's job to like you said, Ryan, pick winners and losers. So the idea of our state doing that is not something I would be very supportive of, and think that we should let the market decide who is the winner and who is a loser. And when it comes to taxes, I mean, that should be it should be a no-brainer. It should be an equal across the board process. And we let the market decide. And if businesses are providing services and they're doing a good job, and their customers like that, then they'll be successful. If they're not, then their customers will they'll let them know, and that business won't be successful. But it shouldn't be our state government or local government's jobs to decide who's successful and who's not. I think that's for the market to decide.
Thank you. The next question relates to something that I don't think any of our county candidates would generally deal with too much, or at least they think they don't. And this is part of the problem. The average citizen doesn't understand exactly how much the federal government owns of the state of Utah. If you ask that question, the reality is it's 2/3 of the land of the state. So while essentially nobody in Utah wants to disturb our national parks, our national recreation areas, military installations, etc., most federal land in Utah doesn't fit into any of those categories. And keeping all of that land under federal control inflicts great harm on our state's economy, environment, tax base, affordable housing, and especially public education. How much of Utah should the federal government own? First part of the question. And what changes to state and federal law would you support in this area? So we'll first go to Mr. Campbell on this one.
The answer is 0 as far as how much land should the federal government own.
Well, hang on. I'm going to cut you off. What about Hill Air Force Base? What about Uter?
Okay. Well, when you're phrasing it the way you phrase it, I'm picturing BLM land, Forest Service land, things like that. So, okay, Hill Air Force Base, I'll give that to you. But when we're talking about 2/3 of when you talk about 2/3 of the state being owned by the federal government, the vast majority of that is BLM and Forest Service, and that's what I'm saying. The federal government shouldn't own that kind of land in Utah. If the state wants to have some public land and state parks, that's great, and we can do that because that's a different situation. But I mean, you could also make the argument that the state's going to be a better manager of that land, and we see that with our state parks or with our SITLA land, which, like you said, goes to fund our public schools. I think that's it should be an easy fix. I know it's not an easy fix, or we would have done it already. It's very difficult, especially once the federal government owns something to get that back from them. But I'd support any efforts to make that happen and make sure that Utahns have control of their land, that we can benefit from that tax base. We can put that more funds towards our public schools, and it's it should be.
Looks like we're out of time there, Travis. Thank you. And Lorraine.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that we have too much of our state tied up as in federal control, federal management. I don't know, how exactly to reverse some of those decisions, and our congressmen, I know, are working on that project among many other priorities they have. But I would support efforts to minimize federal land grabs, the continuing kind of thing that's gone on over the last few administrations in our nation's capital. But I do think there are some benefits also that accrue to our state. The land trust uh, connection and investment in our education system in the state of Utah is an absolutely priceless bit of genius that I think we want to secure for the future of our children. That is a very valuable thing, and a very creative piece of government management that has provided a source of security for our education system in Utah. I don't want to disrupt that piece of it. But in general, yeah, I am also concerned about federal management, federal control of so much land in our state.
Thank you. And so that the listeners understand what we're talking about when they mention SITLA or the land trust, the state institutional trust lands is what SITLA stands for. And that refers to its statehood. We were granted, 4 parcels for every section of the state. So if you look at a map of the state, you have these 4 sections that consistent across the state that are directly used to fund education. Now, those are not federally owned. That is not part of what we're talking about. It's not part of the 2/3. That is owned and operated by the State Institutional Trust Lands Association, and that is managed exclusively to generate income for our schools. And so and there's a direct connection to that. Every year, the more money that we make in that fund from this revenue generated on those lands is divvied out, whatever that percentage that we're able to spend that year on the interest is divvied out to each school's community council. So that's stuff that you can make that decision in your local community. 99% of the time, those of you listening, you can approach your school. There's a period at the beginning of each school year where you can sign up to serve on that. There's usually not a lot of people raising their hands to help make those decisions at the school. Just a little pro tip. You can talk to the principal and be appointed to that position to help make those decisions and provide your school with what they need. So again, that's not part of the federal inventory. That is already state land. Now, acquiring additional lands, seeking additional transfers from the federal government for such a purpose, we get hit on. Our next topics is a good intro into education funding. We get hit on that every year at the state legislature. No matter, I think from the beginning of time, and a lot of that is due to really our demographics. We have, we are the youngest state in the nation. And we have, again, 1/3 of the land we're on to produce revenue, to tax, to provide that revenue. And so it's really not comparing apples to apples when we're talking about education funding, when our eastern, compadres have 98% of their state generating property tax for their school system, and we have 30%, 36%, or 33%. It's just not the same. So given that explanation and that SITLA discussion, what do you support when it comes to education funding? How do you propose that we address our funding and educational goals? We'll go ahead and start with Lorraine.
That's the question of the year, isn't it? We have the state legislature that just passed an education bill that changed the funding mechanism for our schools and proposed all kinds of inflation adjusted increases and so forth, guarantees for education that they can't yet guarantee because the amendment has to be changed to the Constitution, has to be approved by the voters in November. So this is really up in the air right now, a really concerning question. I am nervous for the future of education in the state of Utah. I think this is a slippery slope. I'm not terribly fond of the idea of cutting off the constitutional provision there that earmarks income for education. But unfortunately, what's happened is because we were not willing to change our tax code to adjust for that lump sum going to education, they're now trying to shift the um, that constitutional requirement to permit the state to be funded in other ways, other more creative ways. So I don't know where this is going to end up. I am a strong proponent of proper funding of education. That is the biggest investment we make in our future, is our education. I would like to see something as concrete and predictable.
Looks like we're out of time there, Lorraine. That's okay. You've both done that once, and no worries. Hey, Mr. Campbell, education funding.
The legislature increased funding, and I just hope that like Lorraine had mentioned, I hope that gets that bill gets an amendment gets voted up by our voters, and I think that was a good thing. I think we definitely need to fund our education system to make sure that students have that foundation, that they're getting a quality education from those early years, because if they fall behind early on, it's that much more difficult to catch up and to have that good foundation when they're moving on to the workforce. So I want to make sure that our education system is fully funded. I think funding is obviously important, but I think our main focus should be on student outcomes. I think that should be a big driver on how we fund our education is what's going to provide us with the best student outcomes. I mean, if you just throw too much money at it, but we don't have the outcome, we're wasting that money. So I think when it comes to education, the students' outcomes should be a big part of that whole process, to make sure that we're providing students with the best possible outcome that we can, and to make sure that we have good, energetic teachers who are ready to teach for their career and stay in the classroom and do what they do best, and that's teach. So I think funding is important, but I think it should be.
All right. Education's a hard one to keep under 90 seconds. Okay. Our next question relates to that, though. And really, Travis's last statement hit on this issue. One of the issues that we have struggled with really across the nation, this isn't unique to Utah, is that about trying to give you the accurate number. In some of the studies I've seen, 2/3 of teachers leave the classroom within 5 years of beginning their teaching career. What would you suggest into how we address that? I mean, because we're talking about going through all the training, getting all the certifications, their degrees, investing in that in our communities and in our schools, and then bailing within 5 years. That can't possibly be the best use of our efforts and our funding. We'll go ahead and start with Travis.
So is the question, how do we get teachers not to leave the classroom?
Yeah, what do you propose?
Well, I think a big part of it is going to be part of that funding mechanism, to make sure that we're paying teachers a salary that they can survive comfortably on. The second thing would be to make sure that they have resources in the schools that can help with mental health and with some of those extra challenges that some students may face. And I think those two things could really help help that situation, to help teachers have more success when it comes to student outcomes, and to make sure that they're able to teach their students. And I think if they've got a better classroom experience, and we're paying them as they should be paid, I think that could be a definite starting off point to make sure that we address this teacher shortage, and hopefully that could be a fix in the future.
Okay, Lorraine.
As I have been going door to door, I've met various teachers and I've asked them that question because I'm very curious about what's going on with the teacher shortage in the state of Utah. And they tell me, I was surprised by this, they tell me it is not the money. They said they're making enough money. That is not the issue. The issue is what's going on in the classroom. And there's two parts of it. The first part is the requirement that they test every single week. They said that they're spending so much time testing that they cannot teach. The second piece is that they feel like they do not have the support to control the classroom. And I think you're looking at a different demographic in this generation of children coming into schools They have a lot of emotional issues going on. It's difficult for these teachers to control what's going on in the classroom and accomplish what they were trained to do, which is teach our kids. I absolutely believe we have great teachers in the state of Utah, but they need support in the classroom. They need these requirements. A lot of them are federal requirements that they be tested constantly. It interferes with teaching. Let them do what they know how to do and relieve them of those requirements and give them the support they need in the classroom.
Okay, thank you. We've talked about tax policy just a little bit. The legislature just went through an exercise over the past year on an attempt to restructure our tax system, particularly the sales tax in the state of Utah. We had a lot of questions come in. How did you feel about that proposal? Did you support the proposal? How would you have voted? You can imagine that's on top of mind for a lot of delegates right now, having just gone through that process and then the subsequent repeal that we saw shortly after. So go ahead and ask your position on that, and if you have any thoughts or proposals on how to deal with those structural changes that the legislature was seeking to make. We'll go ahead and start with Lorraine this time.
Okay, massive question. First of all, I support tax reform. It has to happen in the state of Utah. The problem is it happened behind closed doors, and they did not have the support of the people when they did it. And I need to say right up front, I feel like sales tax on food is not the way to go. It's not ever going to be the way to go. It is a regressive tax. It earmarks a population that cannot bear that burden. It's the wrong way to go. I do believe in tax reform. I'd like to go the direction that they started down several years ago when they started about taxing services. Shift the tax base, yes, but let's not tax food and tax this lower third of the population that are already so heavily burdened financially.
Okay, Travis?
Yeah, I support anything that's going to lead to our state taking less taxpayer money. I liked the idea initially, but like Lorraine said, I mean, it fell off somewhere, and it clearly wasn't getting the support of the public. And I did, going back to the education funding that we were just talking about, I think that's the smarter approach when it comes to tax reform, rather than a one-time complete overhaul of our system. Maybe we need to take smaller steps, like the legislature did this last session, and fund our services and fund our government in different ways. And by moving services for children and those with disabilities into our income tax fund, I think we can still fund education, but we can also fund those programs, which then opens up the general fund for the needs there. So I think there's a way to do it without increasing taxes. I think we can be smarter about it and take those smaller steps. That's probably the better approach, and that's what I'd like to see.
Okay, our next question relates to the current situation that we have economically in the state. So the state legislature just barely passed a budget a few weeks ago that suddenly is invalid based on the turn the economy has taken with this COVID-19 outbreak. We know that that's likely going to need to be redone maybe as soon as this summer, with some serious adjustments again in the fall. They're still trying to figure that out. So the question then is, if you were in office right now, and this very well for one of you may be hopefully the reality in January, you're probably going to have to cut first thing. So where do you start? Where do you start? What needs to be looked at first? How do you deal with potential cut that could be rather painful in any of the areas of state government? Travis?
Well, I think there'd be an issue just trying to cut complete programs without looking into which ones are being successful. But I think at a more of an across the board look at cutting certain percentages, like small percentages from each budget, could be helpful. Our federal government tried to. We had some folks in Congress that tried something like that to address our national debt. Obviously, it wasn't successful because we're still racking up that national debt. But I think that's an approach that we as a state could take when we need to make cuts, looking at at all budgets and trying to make small cuts to each of those, an across the board uniform cut, rather than completely cutting out programs or services that some people are going to be relying on. So I think that'd be the approach I'd like to first take a look at, and I think we could really cover a lot of ground that way.
Okay, Lorraine?
Well, first of all, Utah is one of the best managed states in the United States. We are ready for this. We've prepared for it for years. Utah has a rainy day fund, and some are arguing, hey, it's time to dip into our rainy day fund, but I don't see any will to do that even now. I think Utah is tightening its belt, and I've seen firsthand, for instance, what is going on in the court system. The court system has shut down. They have a shoestring staff at this point. They work only 2 days a week, and they're doing things online. I think every department in the state of Utah is tightening its belt and will continue to tighten its belt until we get through this crisis. I do not know at this point, what our tax consequences in terms of revenue are going to be in the state of Utah, but I think we are doing very well, even with volunteer responses to this by various state departments. If there needs to be further tightening, let's go to fewer days a week. I think we did that with state government, worked very well.
Okay, thank you. There are, there will be a lot of fallout as we move through this, and hard to understand sometimes what those things are going to be. I mean, it's really impossible in a lot of areas of the economy. One of the things that has been talked about at the state legislature is perhaps a more nimble approach to legislating itself. What I mean by that is right now we have a 45-day session by constitutional amendment that starts in January of every year and runs to mid-March. If you were to wave a magic wand and create the scenario that you would like to see in state government, how would you change the approach to legislation as it is in the state of Utah right now to be as effective and responsive as possible? Travis, go ahead and start with you.
Well, I like our system the way it is now. It's I wouldn't want to see it turned into like a full-time legislature. I like that it's a part-time legislature, and our representatives have full-time jobs, and they're members of our community, and I think that gives them a better understanding of what's happening day to day. And so I don't know if I'd change a whole lot about the system now. I think it's working, and I think, like Lorraine just mentioned before, that we are one of the best managed states in the country, and I wouldn't want to change that system that's obviously working so well and allowing everyday people, everyday citizens to take part in the legislative process. I like it, and I don't think there's a whole lot I would change. It's working.
Okay, Lorraine.
I think it's working too, but I think I would tweak this. I think this COVID experience has opened our eyes to some of the incapacity we have to operate without everyone being physically present. The legislature, for instance, chose to just social distance, no handshaking during the session, that kind of thing, to avoid an outbreak during the session. But had they had to shut down, what options did we have to continue our with the legislature? There's no other means to accomplish their purposes and finish the session. I think we need to have legislation that will permit representatives to vote remotely and to debate bills remotely, to function remotely. I think that's the wave of the future, and we need to prepare ourselves for it. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to shift gears just a little bit to talk about your experience a little bit. What have you done? What has most prepared you in your career or your life for this role? Again, we'll start with Mr. Campbell again.
So my experience the last few years has, I think, really prepared me for this role. I work in government now. I am a constituent liaison for one of our federal delegation, and I think that job has allowed me two things that really prepare me for this. The first is I have a very good understanding of the absolute need for communication with your elected official. That's a big part of my responsibilities, and I see the difference it makes when you have good communication and when other offices don't have good communication. I think that is something that we should expect of every elected official at every level, and it's something that I've definitely become accustomed to it and learned and would take to this role. The other thing that's prepared me is the relationships I've made, both with federal partners, with our state agencies, with current legislators, and our local city and county officials. I think all those relationships are important when it comes to public policy, and having a good way to communicate and a good ability to communicate with constituents and elected officials, I think really is how you'll be effective as a legislator, and that's at least in my experience.
Okay, Lorraine?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because I think everything in my life has prepared me for this. Specifically, I think my legal education has been very significant. My family experience has been very significant. My experience with community service, getting to know my neighbors, the community resources we have within Weber County is very significant. I've had contact with every member of the city council, the county commissioners. I know people in Weber County. I'm connected here. And I think I'm very prepared to step forward and talk about what our priorities here. I've experienced that.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question related to that, what's the first thing you'd like to do? These are very short terms. You're in an election cycle every other year, the member of the House of Representatives. What's the first thing you'd like to work on that right out of the gate when you're the day one you're sworn in? Go ahead and start with Lorraine.
Well, I've mentioned already, I'm concerned about the burden of growth being imposed upon our families here. I would like to do what I can to shift that burden to those who are coming into our state, have them bear their fair share of the cost of that growth. The second thing I'm concerned about are senior citizens, and would like to extend relief to them and increase the exemption level for Social Security income, for instance, give them a tax break there. I have a wish list of family law reforms that I've been working on. I don't know if you're aware, but in the state of Utah, for instance, we have no ability to prevent the abuse of a child. We can only stop it after it happens, respond to it after it happens. That's unacceptable in our state, and I don't think reflects our priorities. We need the ability to respond to circumstances that lead to abuse. And so a lot of family issues that are very concerning to me that I've seen in the courtroom, I've seen in young families that need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Travis, what would you like to do?
Well, I'd like to work with the other elected officials in the legislature here in Weber County and even in Davis and Box Elder to make sure we do have a really cohesive group of legislators pushing for policy for Northern Utah. I want to make sure that Weber County is not overshadowed by Salt Lake and by Utah County. And they're really good about working together and organizing to make sure they get the projects that they're looking for. And I want to make sure that I'm part of that solution for Weber County and working with the other members of the legislature to make sure we're doing what we can to represent our districts while really trying to benefit Northern Utah. A few of the very specific issues I think I could accomplish as a freshman legislator. One is making sure that our GRAMA process, the Government Records Access and Management Act, is working the way it should to make sure that we have a transparent state government, and that when somebody has an issue with their government, they're able to find that information out and to know what our government is doing. The other thing is for our veterans. We have a huge veteran population in Northern Utah. And when we have the biggest veteran home here in Ogden, and there's still veterans waiting, months to get in, I think that's something that we as a state should pick up the slack on and help serve.
Looks like we're out of time there. This next one is a super easy question, probably. And that is, do you support President Trump's reelection? Lorraine.
I'll tell you what I like about President Trump. He's the only president I have ever known who has done exactly what he said he'd do. And we have had tremendous growth under Trump. Unfortunately, things have gone south in a big way with this COVID pandemic. But yeah, I support President Trump.
Travis?
Yes, I'll support him. I'm a big supporter of President Trump, and like Lorraine said, he's doing what he promised to do. Our economy, up until a few weeks ago, which was out of his control, has probably never been better. And he's cutting regulations that's burdening all Americans, and I think that's something I definitely support. Is getting our federal government out of the lives of everybody, and that's something I'm very supportive of and would like to see more of. So there's not a whole lot negative I could say about our president. I'm very supportive of him, and I hope he gets reelected.
Okay, we've got just a couple of questions left. So our second to last question here, as you know, when our elected officials are sworn into office here in the state of Utah, they're required to swear an oath. This is first and foremost an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. Second, to uphold and defend the Constitution of this state, so the state of Utah. And third, to execute the duties of your office with fidelity. Tell us about what you think that oath means to you, and how you intend to fulfill that promise. Lorraine.
Well, I take any oath very seriously, and particularly an oath to defend the Constitution. I look at the Constitution of the United States and also our state constitution as inspired documents designed to protect our personal freedoms and to maintain liberty in our country. And the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It should be the supreme law in our state and in our efforts to promote quality of life changes. Everything that goes on in our legislature needs to be couched in that constitutional framework. I take it extremely seriously. It's one of the reasons that I'm interested in running here is to preserve those freedoms for those who cannot speak for themselves. So I also want to add a little bit in terms of, we just mentioned President Trump. I want the voters to also know that one thing that I do not support about President Trump is the way he has treated women. And I would stand behind efforts to preserve and protect women and those whose rights have not been defended under our Constitution from infringement by law.
Okay, Travis?
I consider myself a constitutional conservative, and I think any decision that I would make, or any bill that I looked at would, the first question I would ask is this something the government should be doing? And the Constitution would be that document that I look to tell me if that's something we should be looking into. And if the answer is no, then it's simple. And I think that's something I would take with me with every decision. Is this constitutional, both federally and at the state level? And if it's within those boundaries, then we have a few more questions to look at. But I think those documents are probably the most important things that they've ever been written, and it's what's created the society we have, and which is the greatest society to ever exist. So I think we need to uphold those at any cost, and I would always look to the Constitution to guide any decision I make.
Okay, thank you. For our final question here, we're going to take this in a little bit different direction. Your district is encompassed entirely in Weber County, so I'm going to open this up to the entire county. Although your answer may indicate how good of a politician you are. What is your favorite restaurant in Weber County? First part of the question. Second part of the question is, what is your favorite dish at that restaurant? Lorraine.
Oh gosh. Well, my favorite restaurant just went out of business. Um,
Oh no.
well, so I mean, you limited me. Of those that are still open, um,
Well, hang on. What was the one that went out of business?
well, the Italian restaurant that used to be out here in South
Zuka's.
Lucas, yes.
Yeah. All
Zucca's,
right. I'm more to that as well. But
that was my
okay.
favorite.
All right.
I loved their eggplant parmesan. It was
Mm.
terrific. But of those that are still here, I really enjoy um, um, Bombay House. I'm trying to think, is that the name of it, down on Washington? I like the way it's just a mom and pop Indian restaurant. You feel like you're supporting the local economy every time you go there, but it's also great food. So yeah,
And your favorite dish there?
I always get the chicken tikka masala.
All right. I think that's called Bombay Grill, if I
Bombay,
remember right. Is that it? Is that what we call that one?
right?
Okay. Great restaurant. Travis.
So my go-to is Eastern Winds on Washington, and
Oh,
you cannot beat their Mongolian beef. So that's my always my go-to for takeout or dining in, and I always get the Mongolian beef. If I
okay.
have time too, Sonora Grill at the Junction and their grilled steak burrito. I don't know. That's a very close second.
Okay. All right. And now this next part of this answer might cost you just a little bit. Only $10. Do you two agree to spend $10? If you guys will put in $10, I'll put in $10, and we're gonna give the first delegate who answers correctly what your favorite restaurant was a $20 gift certificate to that restaurant to help out your favorite restaurants in this unique situation that we're in. What do you say?
Absolutely,
All
absolutely.
right. All
Yeah.
right. So $20 gift card to Bombay Grill or Eastern Winds. That one's pretty close. I need to get myself down to Eastern Winds. So $20 gift card to Eastern Winds or Bombay Grill for the first delegate that emails Weber County GOP at gmail.com with the correct answer to this. Now, you do have to actually be a county delegate. So this isn't just open to everyone. We're going to check the list. County delegate in District 10 that emails this, then we'll figure out a way to get you a $20 gift card to their favorite restaurants. Again, we appreciate you spending some time with us tonight as we head into our final statements from the candidates. Now, this can be anything you guys would like us to hear, anything you think we didn't ask that you were hoping we would, or that you just feel like the delegates would need to know, maybe questions that they've asked you directly a lot, or anything like that would be totally appropriate. But we'll give you each 3 minutes again, and we'll go from there. We'll go ahead and start this time with Lorraine.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the delegates for tuning in with us and for your questions. I love hearing what your ideas are about what should be happening in our government and how to respond to that. It's been a pleasure to get to know you as I've been going door to door and meeting with so many of you. And want you to know how much I enjoy being part of Weber County and look forward to this opportunity to represent you. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot over the last 2 months that I've been going door to door is what community means, what it means to me and what it means to you. And I think what it boils down to is this sense of caring that we have for one another and that we sense for one another in Weber County. It's really extraordinary, and I salute you for that, for caring enough to participate in our government and our system and assuring that good candidates represent us. I'm running for office because I care, because I think I have something to contribute. I hope when you have a chance to vote next week that you'll remember that and that you'll give me an opportunity to represent you at the state legislature. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lorraine. And Travis.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the delegates being willing to serve, especially during this time. I wish we had more opportunities for face-to-face interactions, but for those of you who I've talked to on the phone, I appreciate your time, in the evenings to chat with me about the issues that are important to you. If we haven't spoken yet, I hope we get the chance soon. You'll probably be hearing from me again in the next few days. I'm seeking this nomination through the through the convention system. So I'm relying on you as delegates to vet us as candidates and choose who you think is going to not only be able to win in November, but to really serve our community the best way possible at the legislature. My family, we have deep roots in Weber County. I was born here. My wife and I, both of our families have been here for generations. We knew this is where we wanted to raise our kids. We actually live just 5 doors down from my in-laws, which some people might think is crazy, but I love it, and I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. And this community has been great to my family, so I just felt like it was time for me to give back and to serve the community that's been so good to me. So that's why I'm running, and I hope I can get your support.
Thank you both again. We really appreciate, we love, frankly, having options like this where we have unique, solid candidates that have perspectives that will benefit our communities and certainly the policy-making bodies in our state. And thank you for taking the time to be here with us tonight. Thank you to our delegates who are still doing their part to research and prepare for our upcoming digital convention. Again, this is a unique situation, but like I stated earlier, I really do believe that we're going to be better off for having gone through it. And may we unite as a party, as a people, as we continue to work through these issues over the next several months. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. This is Ryan Wilcox. You have Jake Sawyer here working with us in the background to get this produced for us. We really appreciate all your work, Jake, and all those who have supported us here at the county party to help make this possible. Again, this is Ryan Wilcox with the Weber County Republican Party. You've been listening to the District 10 virtual Meet the Candidate Night with our candidates Travis Campbell and Lorraine Brown. Best of luck to you both, and we'll see you on the road. Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.